in case you didn't recognize that, Bob Dylan's Times They Are A-Changing. And I want to thank Bethany Aiken, our guest pianist this morning. So, welcome to First Parish in Needham, a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham. I'm Phil Lyons, currently co-chair of the worship committee. I'm a 75-year-old cisgendered male who uses he, him, and his pronouns. I'm sporting a receding hairline and glasses and the universal COVID mask here with a white business shirt and tie. So this is the first time I've been back to the First Parish worship service in person since the start of the pandemic. So welcome me too. My wife Carolyn and I joined First Parish back in 2008, right after the major renovations, so we've been active members for 14 years. Last fall we moved to Hudson, but through the magic of technology, we've been able to stay connected to First Parish and continue our relationship with this vibrant spiritual community. First Parish is a proud LGBTQ welcoming congregation, climate justice seeking green sanctuary, Level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation for immigration justice, and 8th principal congregation committed to anti-racism and anti-oppression. We remember that we are gathered today on the occupied territory of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket peoples, and that our early church financially benefited from our minister and members enslaving African adults and children. Whoever you are, whatever your background, and wherever you're participating from, you're welcome here. As you know, our congregation has been gathering for Sunday services and programming in a hybrid, multi-platform format with masked in-person as well as online gatherings. Over the summer, most of our staff takes a much-needed break. We're continuing to offer Sunday services both online and here in the air-conditioned parish hall. We will be scaling back a bit by reducing the number of live in-person services and substituting a number of pre-recorded services from other venues, like the UUA General Assemblies, both past and present. They will also be available on YouTube, followed by a Zoom social hour. But unlike during the rest of the year, we will not be offering the Zoom room to view the services themselves, only for the social hour. So go to Zoom after the service, go to YouTube for the service, and those links are in the Saturday Bell Notes that goes out. So the other difference is that the Joys and Concerns will also be available in the Zoom social hour, particularly if we're having a recorded service from another venue. So if you do come to Parish Hall to watch the service on the big screen or to participate in a live service, bring your laptop or tablet or something if you want to join the Zoom social hour afterwards. If you'd like to help out with logistical support or Zoom hosting, please contact either me or Peter Panoff soon so we can work you into our schedule. Oh, I should also mention that over the summer, we are collecting for the Needham Community Council's food pantry. People who want to bring staple goods, check the table out in the hallway if you come in person. Our buildings remain under certain restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but our faith community welcomes everyone. You can learn more about all that's happening at First Parish by going to our website, uuneedham.org, or by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For all the Zoom links and the most up-to-date information, please sign up for our email newsletter by going to our website and clicking Get Involved Newsletter, or sending your request to office@uuneedham.org. Over the summer, we will keep you posted about each week's services in a special Saturday version of the Bell Notes. But the regular, more fully inclusive Bell Notes will only come out twice over the summer. Our sincere hope is that these various kinds of services and connection opportunities will help us keep the public health precautions required during this pandemic without losing much of the spiritual, emotional, and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. If you're watching this service from outside the church, please take a moment now to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat box. This morning we have the pleasure of having Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh with us again to lead our service. Many of you remember when she and her husband, Reverend Clyde Grubbs, served as our interim ministers during Reverend Katie's maternity leave. This year, she will once again be serving as our pastoral care minister over the summer. So let us welcome again everyone here and those watching on YouTube and begin our worship together. Good morning. The next bit is yours, I think.
So yes, good morning. It's wonderful to be with you again. I am Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And in terms of a physical description, I am a 5'2" woman who has female-appearing woman, short brown hair. I wear glasses, and I also have a turquoise robe with a turquoise stole on this morning. We'll begin with a mutual call to worship, which is my style in leading worship, that we are all ministers together and we are all calling each other to worship. So in your order of service, you will see the words printed to "You Are Welcome Here" by the Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner, and I invite us all to read it together now. You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here. If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, have AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here. If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or had behaviors that you regret, you are welcome here, and we will help offer restorative justice and healing. Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity.
There's a little sparkler thing there. So this morning our unison chalice lighting, so again, encourage your participation, written by Ann Williams Clark, in this time of uncertainty. We gather in this time of uncertainty, full of unknowns, as angst closes in upon us. We light this chalice with a flame that draws us together. With this flame, we cut through the dankness of isolation and are warmed by the fires of our interconnection. For this moment, this radical moment, we find a certainty within the noble bounds of love and community. You know, you're wearing a mask, you go to lick your lips and you can't lick your fingers. So, in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of the church strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as printed in your order of service. And we here will join. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world. Though we cannot all gather in person during this time, we are living these promises every day. All right. Tag team here.
Oh, may we have grace together for, as we move in this hybrid world and this new kind of transitioning and having guest ministers. I always say, what's the point of having a guest minister if you don't have some kind of confusion sometimes in the order of service? Okay, it's an opportunity for grace. Our opening hymn this morning is number 170 from the Gray Hymnal, We Are a Gentle, Angry People by Holly Near. That is the title of the hymn. And I recently was reading an article in which the Reverend Julie Taylor, who currently, she's a chaplain and she's currently at Meadville Lombard, participated in a rally for Black Lives Matter in 2015, where she spoke to this hymn and she said, you know, it's okay to also say we are a pissed off people. We are a pissed off people. So beyond being angry, we're also pissed off these days sometimes too. So what we're going to do is sing the first line. We're going to sing 3 verses of this particular hymn, 1, 2, and 6. But we're going to sing the first verse, 1, we, as written usually, we are a gentle, angry people. And then we're going to do, as you feel comfortable, we are a gentle, pissed off people as the second one. And then we're going to move to we are justice-seeking people and we are gentle, loving people. Okay? All right, and Bethany will lead us through that. You can rise in body and spirit as you're willing and able if you're present. And online too, you're welcome to do that. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Now we're going to do pissed off. We are a gentle, pissed off people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, pissed off people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. You may be seated. I will add that Holly Near, the writer of this song, gave permission through Allison to change those words just for today. This song was created in a time when, in the aftermath of Harvey Milk's assassination, and it had became a very powerful song for the LGBTQ rights movement, but also has been used in social justice movements around the world. And Holly Near was also one of our WARE speakers, if you don't know that as well.
Okay. Find my Stones in the Water script. So it's now time to share with one another our joys and concerns. This summer, we will be sharing mostly in the Zoom social hour. But if you have something during the week that you'd like to be acknowledged during the Joys and Concerns time, you can send an email to Becky Siebens during July or to Lynn Jakowski during August and the beginning of September. Try to get that to her by midnight of the Thursday before the service. So we only had one pre-submitted candle this week from Tom Gaiman and his family. He says, our beloved Shelty Mitch passed Wednesday evening at home with us. He was a little trooper right to the end, and he will be greatly missed. So now if you'd like to share a concern this morning, come put a stone in the water. I'll do the one for the Gaiman family. Please tell us your name and your pronouns, and share briefly what is on your heart.
My name is Haley Willett. I use she, her pronouns, and I am casting this stone of not just sorrow, but also frustration and, frankly, disgust, as even with the brutal war and ethnic cleansing raging in eastern Ukraine at the hands of Russia rages on, somehow the right wing of this country still manages to pursue their own fundamentalist, frankly fascist agenda that's much more in line with than the Russian Orthodox Church in the East, led by a certain Patriarch Kirill, who, interestingly, blames things like Ukraine holding gay prides, while simultaneously calling them the Nazis in the same sentence for such invasions. This, with the shameful sort of just deliberate assaults on women and minorities and just the dignity of all people, whilst differences should be cast aside in this moment to stop the fascist regime of Putin in its tracks. The fact that that is not being done, I'm ashamed, to be honest. That is all I have to say for now.
Thanks.
Good morning.
Step a little closer.
I'm here to recognize and remember Gerhard Meyer, my cousin, who died this past week in Germany, age 97. I remember him as my favorite cousin ever since 1939, when I was a little kid, and he was a big kid that I admired, and he was a beautiful man.
Tell us your name again. I'll put the stone in for you. Okay, thanks.
My name is Susan McGarvey. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I have a stone for a very, very sad reason. My really good friend, Caroline Murray, died suddenly on Friday when she was gardening. She got stung by a hornet, and they weren't able to save her. Caroline and her husband Ted lived in Needham and were members of the Congregational Church. They raised a son, Ben, and a daughter, Sarah, here. They now live in Ashfield, and that's where they were when this happened. And Caroline was a school committee member, a member of the League of Women Voters, worked at the community council. She's the anchor for so many friends. It's tragic and just so sad. Thank you.
My name is Deborah Niles, and I am putting this stone in for the family of a friend of mine who I taught with her for many years in Wayland, and her older brother took his life this past week. And their father is a very active climate activist in Natick, and he wrote recently that mental health is a real thing. And it really is. This is for their family.
I'll just add on a personal note. My sister and her husband in Chicago have both come down with COVID, so keep them in your prayers as well. So for all the joys and sorrows that we still hold in our hearts, and in acknowledging the prayers of our neighbors near and far, we place a final stone in the water and remember that even though we are apart, we are still deeply connected.
I invite us now just to enter into a moment of silence, quietness. I'll lead a Zen Buddhist words for you right now, and then I'll follow it with a pastoral prayer. So as you feel comfortable, just allow your eyes to close or drop down into a soft focus. Let yourself find a comfortable way to sit. Both feet on the floor can be helpful, your hands resting in your lap or at your side. Just notice the points of contact between your body and wherever you're sitting, either here or at home. And let yourself sink into the point of contact between your body and the chair or the couch. And let yourself feel that support for a moment. A support that's available without any effort. And bring your attention to the breath. Notice how it comes in cool and it's warmed by your body on exhale. And again, just invite parts of your body that might be feeling tension to relax if they're willing and able. It might mean lifting your shoulders up and dropping them down or rolling your neck. And let the muscles of your face soften and relax. And if you can invite a half smile to your lips as I invite our bell to sound 3 times. And sit quietly with the breath. God of many names and no names, many genders and no gender, and whom we know within our Unitarian Universalist tradition as a precious and mysterious spirit of life and love that moves in us and among us and out into our larger world. We are grateful this morning to be together in this hybrid way, the opportunity to be in person, the opportunity to witness online and to share in social hour through the miracle of technology and the persistence of the volunteers who bring our Sunday morning service to us in these challenging times. We give thanks for all the volunteers and staff and clergy of this congregation. We give thanks to the pastoral care team who stays in touch and helps to sustain the love and care amidst this congregation. And even in these challenging times, we can still notice the beauty available in this world, the beauty of this day, the changing patterns of the weather, the opportunities to be outside. We give thanks for that beauty. And we hold in our hearts the many sorrows among us in these times, and also the anger, the sorrow of sudden and unexpected loss, the sorrow of the challenges of adequate health care and adequate mental health care in these times, the fears and anxieties posed by these virus strains that are still among us, and the heartbreak that is brought, and the anger and the rage that is brought by the ongoing many sources of oppression in these times, particularly in the recent Supreme Court decision and the impact that that is having among many Supreme Court decisions lately, as well as what is happening in the states and the impact on our LGBTQIA+ communities of identity. And the violence of war and the violence in our society that brings about mass shootings and violence from guns generally. We hold all of this and commit as Unitarian Universalists to continue to care for one another and support one another in the spaces of our congregations and to unite together to work towards a larger world of beloved community, justice, and equity. May it always be so. Blessed be, and amen. And let's sing a pastoral responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. It was actually written as a prayer in the 1980s by Carolyn McDade after attending a Central American Solidarity meeting. She wrote it as a prayer to herself, and it has become a hymn widely used among Unitarian Universalists. You may remain seated for this. Spirit of Life. It's number 123, and your gray hymnal is in your order of service.
Come to me.
Now, I understand the congregation has heard the story, Desmond Gets Free by Matt Meyer within this last year. And I wanted to share it again with this particular sermon, but also to give gratitude that Matt was a recent winner of the Silver Nautilus Award, and that was announced at General Assembly. So next time you see Matt, you can congratulate him on winning that award for this little book. So I'm going to summarize parts of it because it is rather long, but it is nice to revisit. And it's the story of Desmond the mouse, who lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land, and who suddenly, one morning, found that he couldn't quite roll over because his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. And he thought it was a boulder that had fallen on him. And he pushed and he tugged and he tried to get the boulder to move, but it wouldn't move. And when he was out of breath and just about to give up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. And he thought, oh, this is great. Giraffe, could you please push the boulder a few inches in the other direction so that I could go free? And the giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed the way giraffes do and said, silly mouse, that's no boulder. That's an elephant that's fallen asleep in the middle of the meadow just on your tail. Well, if you could just wake him up and ask him to roll over a few inches in the other direction, I could go free. And the giraffe said, well, you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this. Desmond replied quietly, well, I do not appreciate your neutrality. And then he saw a gazelle and asked the gazelle the same thing so that he could go free. And the gazelle said, I see your problem there, but you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in another animal's business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these. And Desmond replied, almost to himself this time, I do not appreciate your neutrality. And Desmond tried to call out to the elephant, and he tried to push, and he tried, and he tried, and he was out of breath when he saw another mouse come up. My name is Nelson. Nelson, this giant elephant has fallen asleep on my tail. I wonder if you might run out and call into his giant ears and ask him to roll over a few inches so that I could go free. And Nelson ran all the way to the other end of the giant elephant body and called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of the giant elephant head, but the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but he felt too comfortable to move. Then Nelson said, I have an idea, don't move. And he ran off and he got a whole bunch of other mice friends to come help. And the whole group of them climbed up to the top of the ear, and Nelson climbed right up on the last one, up to the giant ear, and he said, shouted out, asking the elephant to move. And the elephant made a giant low groan, "Vroom. I am comfortable just where I am. Go away." And Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and all of them yelled out together, "Excuse us! It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over a few inches in the other direction so he can go free." And this time, the elephant listened, because it was kind of loud. "I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket." And he rolled over a few inches, and the mice climbed down, and Desmond and Nelson, and they were all free, and they had a beautiful party together in the woods, in the meadow. So this book is dedicated to the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who spoke often of the lack of appreciation for neutrality if an elephant is sitting on a mouse's tail.
This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer to give what we can to build and sustain the world we envision. For the entire summer, our plate collection will be divided equally between First Parish in Needham and the Needham Community Council, which is a local nonprofit which runs, among other things, our local food pantry. If you're watching from home and would like to donate to today's offering, you can use one of 3 different methods. For those of you with a smartphone, you can use our Text to Give program. Just put in the phone number 73256 and text to that number UU Needham space plate space, then the $sign with the amount you'd like to give, all in one message. If you want your money applied to your pledge, please text that instead to that same phone number, 73256, with UU Needham Pledge 22 or Pledge 23, depending on whether you want it applied to the fiscal year just completed or the new fiscal year. Follow that with the $sign and the amount you'd like to give. If you prefer to mail First Parish a check, please make it out to First Parish in Needham, put the date of this service and the word collection in the memo line, and then mail your check to 23 Dedham Avenue, Needham, Mass. 02492. Alternatively, if you want the money applied to your pledge for either the fiscal year just finished or the upcoming year, put FY22 or FY23 in that memo line instead. The last and perhaps easiest method is to use our website, uuneedham.org, to make your donation. There is a giving box in the upper right corner with a drop-down menu where you'll find an entry labeled Donate Now. Following that link and signing into your Realm account, you'll be able to fill in your donation information and choose a recipient fund for its destination, such as plate collection. For those of you here in the parish hall, you can donate by cash or check as the collection plate comes around. Thank you for everything you are able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments during the offertory to give what you can and know it will be gratefully received. May the usher please come forward. Thank you, Jamie.
Our reading this morning comes from Lifting Our Voices, Readings in the Living Tradition. It's number 48 in that by the Reverend Stephen Kendricks. We are here to face the truth about ourselves, about this faith we love, and the ways it presently serves others and the world, as well as to open ourselves to ways it can be better and more joyfully reflect our potential and core values. We want to know the ways we are bound to one another as well as to larger religious movements, normally beyond our sight and vision. We say we are open and diverse, yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old paths and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service to a world that needs our message, our hope, our revived energy. We are gathered to learn, to unlearn, to hear, and to move forward. Amen. And let's join together in hymn number 1023, Building Bridges. We're going to sing it through twice. It's a song discovered by a British Quaker named Elizabeth Cave. She heard the song at Greenham Common, which was a peaceful sit-in at a nuclear energy plant in England. Elizabeth Cave sent the song to the Britain Yearly Children's Meeting newsletter where it was published. Someone else saw it there and submitted it to Sing Out magazine, who published it in their Rise Up Singing collection. And Nick Page's arrangement of this round, which premiered at the General Assembly in 2002, is published by Hal Leonard's Publishing. And we're not going to sing it as a round today, but we're going to sing it through twice. I invite you to rise in body and spirit as you're willing and able. So I thank you again for inviting me to be with you today. It's good to be in person again. During the peak of the pandemic, as well as a couple years prior to that, I was preaching 3 sermons that were linked by the theme of our prelude, the Bob Dylan song, "The Times They Are A-Changin'," a few of which I've led for you in worship services here in the past. And I regard this sermon today as the 4th in that series, and a continued reflection on the question of how are we, as a Unitarian Universalist people, called to embody collective liberation and transformation personally, congregationally, and through our social justice commitments in our larger shared world. How do we live fully into the promise of our particular faith tradition through our personal and collective multi-faith spiritual practices in light of our contemporary challenges, including how we name and claim our national holidays, as I preached last year and is continued to be a question as we come upon 4th of July again this year. And in particular, how do we reach and engage deeply across cultural divides to save our planet and all of her creatures, including ourselves? In our Story for All Ages this morning, Matt Meyer speaks to our call to side with love against oppression, to find the wisdom in the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu's call to resist neutrality in the face of injustice. How do we hold the experiences of righteous rage and being pissed off alongside the experience of being a gentle and loving people. How do we hold those two together? It's not an easy task. As the late Bell Hooks has written, we lost two giants at the end of 2021, Desmond Tutu as well as Bell Hooks. The language of collective liberation originates with Bell Hooks in her 2006 book, Outlaw Culture. In other writings, Hooks recognizes that cultures of power and domination teach us to be afraid, to choose safety over risk, and overvaluing diversity and connection, even sometimes to go to war in the name of peace and safety, a deeply paradoxical conundrum. Love is a necessary countercultural force to cultures of power and domination, according to Bell Hooks. In 2000, she wrote in her book, All About Love, quote, "I feel our nation's turning away from love, moving into a wilderness of spirit so intense we may never find our way home again. I write of love to bear witness both to the danger in this movement and to call for a return to love." End quote. There is indeed much to find fearful in our larger world, from ongoing systemic oppression and inequities, including risks to democracy and voter suppression, the recent overturning of Roe versus Wade, and brutal laws impacting the LGBTQIA+ communities in the United States. And that's not even to mention fears from the ongoing international COVID resurgences, and now the looming possibility of World War III over Ukraine, as well as the ever-present climate crisis, and a Supreme Court that's gutting the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as gun control laws. Like, okay, let's just take a breath for a moment. It's a lot, right? I can say it's a friggin' lot, right? It's a friggin' lot for everybody to be holding right now. So in these changing times, how do we complexify our understanding of the word love in order to choose to love across our cultural divides, rather than lead from superiority, fear, or hate? How do we also choose love, compassion, and a deep, calm curiosity over the visceral discomforts and overwhelm that can foster apathy and inertia? How do we minimally create spaciousness within ourselves and in our larger justice movements for a deep and calm curiosity towards people and situations we may want to separate ourselves from and deem as other or as irrational and thus never understandable, or as less than human in some way, including as pure evil? How do we hold our own cultural values with worth and dignity and respect while never, never losing sight of the inherent dignity and worth of another, no matter their beliefs and behaviors? The international scope and potential of our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to reflect on these big questions and their implications for us. This is nowhere more challenging than in seeking to understand or relate to human phenomena such as slavery and genocide, the Holocaust, New Jim Crow, murders of black men, women, and trans people, mass shootings, and the brewing of global war and climate devastation. When in pain or witnessing pain, there is a very human tendency to reduce what actually are complex institutional systems of cultural socialization to merely individualized or interpersonal stock stories of good people versus bad or evil people. And stock stories never foster deep curiosity, understanding, and structural analysis. Instead, they only apportion individual blame or individual heroism, and they deepen polarization. They deepen polarization. The same dynamic is at play in our human psyches when we other human beings who commit violence as bad people who deserve to be locked away and out of sight, or entire groups of people who belong to a particular political party as purely irrational or evil. Just can't understand them, just can't. Now here I'm reflecting on all who participated over a year ago in the violent insurrection and invasion of the United States Capitol, as well as on those who were enacting laws in particular states, preparing trigger laws in anticipation of the Supreme Court decision against reproductive rights and against the LGBTQIA people and communities, particularly our trans siblings. More locally, we can reflect on the 100 individuals who participated in the white supremacist march yesterday here in Boston for 4th of July weekend, waving Patriot Front flags, shouting, "Reclaim America," and also reportedly beating a black man. While the Patriot Front is based in Texas, many cars with Massachusetts license plates were there in support. When you personally and we as Unitarian Universalists reflect on these events, we are not neutral. We are not neutral. We rightly have been moved to side with love and deepen our commitment to democracy and human and voter rights in our national campaigns. Yet what is the quality of our energy when we do so? And what is the impact, ongoing impact on us in reflecting on the quality of our energy? Is it with a sense of deep calm and curiosity as to the actual root causes over what is happening in our country? A sustaining curiosity that leads to systemic analysis? Or is it with self-righteous anger and a feeling of distant superiority over the people who were involved in and continue to foster fear and hate? A superiority that deadens the understanding and connection to how could this happen? What is our public attitude towards an understanding of those who participated in and continue to participate in harm being done, whether here as domestic terrorists or political power seekers or in an international context of war? How are we also collectively seeking to understand and address root causes of what would motivate individuals to engage in this level of harm as human beings to one another? Is there a pathway of restorative justice and hope for possibilities of transformation for them rather than purely retribution? A sense of collective liberation is possible for all of us. Now, I'm going to stress this because I want you to hear me clearly on this. It is important to set limits and boundaries and prevent active harm when it is happening, including tending to or empowering or following the lead of the victims first and foremost, when one is in a position of greater institutional or cultural power. Yet it is equally important for the long run to apply a deep and calm energy of curiosity and compassionate love for the root causes and conditions that prompt human beings to harm one another if we are ever going to hope to bring about collective liberation and transformation for society as a whole, including for our globally, hugely interdependent planet. We have to get there together. We will not get there by deeming particular groups of people as irrational or evil and just writing them off or locking them away from view. The promise of our particular faith tradition is to go deeper in our analysis and actions, particularly for those of us carrying identities of power and privilege, and thus capacity, a larger capacity to act in particular contexts. When we share identities of power and privilege, it is our primary responsibility to create accountability for harm done. Now, many giants of social justice movement we admire as Unitarian Universalists, and we lift them up all the time, have written on the power of authentic, inclusive love for collective liberation and transformation. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, would write, "Power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentiment and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best correcting everything that stands against love." Cornel West has written, tenderness is what love looks like in private. Justice is what love looks like in public. And Valerie Carr, the Sikh leader of the revolutionary love movement, has said, your greatest test is whether you can still see the humanity of the people who disagree with you and people who hurt you. For when you are hurt, you will want to hate. But when you hate the ones who hurt you, you become the darkness that haunts your dreams. Love shines the light. Love returns us to the path of love. Love makes us brave. That's not easy stuff to which we are called as Unitarian Universalists. This is a messy love of and for the complexity of being human with accountability. Accountability that takes into account our various identities and capacities that carry agency versus targeted status. It's not the responsibility of the one being harmed to love their oppressor. It's grace when accountable love is offered in that context. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu knew this when he agreed to chair South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the aftermath of apartheid. Reconciliation was to be distinguished from retribution approaches, and his was an act of grace in agreeing to chair that commission. Yet others, including Heather McGee in her recent book, The Sum of Us, point out that the language of reconciliation can be messy when it hints that restoration of friendly relations is the overall goal. McGee writes of a newer approach that has begun to be established in the United States. Truth, racial healing, and transformation. Placed at the center of this approach as the overall goal is institutional change to address and heal root causes by witnessing to stories of harm and by lifting up the facts of whose stories are always heard and whose are not at institutional levels within particular communities. An example here in Massachusetts has been our UU Mass Action Legislative Network's advocacy on behalf of the Indigenous legislative agenda here to foster change in how schools teach Indigenous history, among other things, as well as their ongoing efforts to get the Indigenous Peoples' Day bill out of committee and passed, with the latest deadline extended to July 15th. To deepen into this larger national and international level of public love and accountability, we each may have work to do on a personal level first. Work in reckoning with our very human tendencies to shame, blame, and other human beings in order to separate from them, to think, I would never be capable of that, and regard ourselves thus as superior. What does it take to think if I grew up in the exact same circumstances, had the same lived experiences, I might be this person? That there's nothing intrinsically about each of us. What does it take to foster curiosity about that? And to begin wondering, how did this person come to do what they did? Biggest task sometimes you put up with, like Hitler. For me, it's been the late, the president who I shall not name, that last person in that, occupying that office. That's one of my biggest tasks. Like, how did this person come to be this way, right? And to practice that, because then I know if he's made that way, others were made that way by a process. And that's the process we have to work on. Not the individual, but the larger systemic issues that are fostering this. Are you with me? Okay. All right. So I think what I'm going to do, as I'm watching time, is I think I'm going to move towards this. So I stress this because it's not uncommon for us as Unitarian Universalists, often because we're coming from places of woundedness, where we have been wounded by former religious traditions or whatever brings us here. We have experienced oppression of some aspect of our identity. We come to this faith seeking salvation, seeking to be healed. We're refugees often in those circumstances, and we're looking for that sense of safety. These identities also can come from not just religion and experiences, but race, class, gender, ability, trauma, sexual orientation, all these identities that can make us feel vulnerable when we're in particular contexts to being targeted. So how do we learn to work internally and humbly with an assessment of our own relative levels of power and privilege in any particular moment to create space effectively for mutual accountability with invitation and love so that we can effectively engage another who might be activating us on some level? How do we work with understanding when in that moment do I potentially have a little bit more privilege in this circumstance than this other person if I actually knew their story better, if I actually engaged them on the level of understanding who they are? When and how do we move forward, and when do we move back in creating that space? What are our practices for doing so with awareness that fosters a willingness to take risks and be held accountable with communal grace or forgiveness when possible, or forgiveness and understanding of ourselves when not? The times they are changing. We do not have the same luxury of time that we may have been accustomed to if we have lived with a certain level of privilege in our lives. We are going to be immersed increasingly and with greater urgency in the task of developing spiritual practices of depth and grounding that will allow us to turn toward our discomforts and avoidance or apathy with humility for engaging in broad fusion coalition movements on behalf of the major cultural and institutional change tasks before us, particularly as we face growing inequities, violence, war, and the climate crisis. Our movement leaders and prophets we admire have been foretelling this day, and now it is here. How do we first begin to notice when we are judging others and turning away from them, shunning them, or avoiding, rather than engaging with curiosity about the larger systemic issues and history that is shaping all of us? And that this deep awareness may guide our words and bridge our actions on behalf of a larger justice and beloved community. How do we begin to have faith in the promise that a collective liberation and transformation does indeed await us if we open to learning to think and reflect from this systemic perspective about our cultural divides and to sharing with authenticity about the visceral discomforts, vulnerabilities, and challenges in doing so, reaching for connection over disconnection? There is hope, and it is an active hope of risking vulnerability together, knowing each other's identities more intimately, sharing our stories and our fears together, and holding each other in community through this process as we risk learning what may be deeply uncomfortable about the real root causes of our human capacity to harm, and how each of us is implicated by relative identities of power and privilege in these systemic root causes. Our Unitarian Universalist sources of the living tradition are bound with promise and wisdom of spiritual practices, as do our commitments to social justice. May we live into the fullest promise of our faith and find our pathways together through spiritual practices of deep and authentic love and systemic analysis and perspective, while building bridges across these cultural divides with integrity on behalf of a shared world in which all may flourish. And when we accomplish this, maybe then we can live into the fullest aspirations of the ideal of 4th of July and our grand old flag. Blessed be. Amen. And we have a hymn next, and it is Wayoya, and it's number 1020 in your teal hymnal. It's written by a Ghanaian drummer, Sol Amarifo. Wayoya is the title song of a 1971 album by Osibisa, a musical group of Ghanaian and Caribbean musicians. It was frequently heard in work camps throughout Central West Africa in the 1970s and 1980s. The arrangement in Singing the Journey comes from this version by Issei Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock. Wayoya, like many other African scat syllables, can have many meanings. According to the song's composer, it means we are going. The song is frequently used in bridging ceremonies. You use ceremonies of passage from youth to young adulthood. So let me rise in body and spirit together and sing this hymn. Remain standing if you like for the mutual benediction. So I invite us to read together these words by Adrian Rich, number 463. Let us read together. My heart is moved by all I cannot say. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world.
As we close our worship today, please remember to keep a careful eye out for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media so you can keep up with opportunities for connection with your faith community during these times of physical isolation. When today's service ends, you are all invited to join us for our Zoom social hour. Please remember, if you fall ill or need any pastoral support, to reach out to our pastoral care team and caring crew via phone or email. This week's pastoral care associate is Judy Hadrick. Over here, we'll be singing with in a moment. We also encourage all of you to check in with your friends at First Parish from time to time and to double check on your own contact information in our online realm directly, if you have not done so recently. It's not often mentioned, but I think our email, if you want to send email to the pastoral care team, is just pastoralcare@uuneedham.org. So we always extinguish our chalice with words promising to carry its flame in our hearts until we are together again. I know that I and you and all of us are deeply committed to that promise, no matter how long it is until we are all together again. So as we extinguish our chalice today, please join me wherever you are in saying those words written by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So, let's see.
Feel free to sing along with me. I'm just going to do one round of the chorus of this song, which will be familiar to everybody. You're a red
Gold flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love. and the brave. Yeah, thy heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag, but should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the grand old flag. Sure.
Happy Fourth, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bethany.
We can always use help with the clear up, but I need to go join the Zoom social hour, so excuse me if I don't.
Trying to do Zoom too. but
Okay.
I'm having internet issues.
Oh,
Where would I?
get the password?
Stay here for?
You could, or you could go into the minister's study. I opened the door for you there.
Okay, okay. So I'll stay here.
Did you get the internet connection?
I'm trying to get Clyde, because Clyde would like to be on Zoom. So.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so the internet thing is being, and I'm trying to get Clyde in here because